Okay, everyone, and again, welcome to OneShul. My name is Brian, and this is our weekly Monday night Torah study class, which I like to call Monday Night Mitzvot. This week, we're going to be looking at a double parsha. It's the parsha Behar-Bechukotai. It's kind of hard for me to pronounce because my Hebrew is terrible, but I think I didn't butcher it, so go me. It is the book of Leviticus, chapters 25 verse 1 through 27 verse 34. And with our study this week, we will actually be wrapping up and finishing the book of Leviticus for this cycle of our Torah portion readings. Now, before we get underway and get into the good stuff of what God's Word through His Torah has to say to us and how we can interpret that for our lives today, I traditionally like to give blessing beforehand. If you want to join in with me, please feel free. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kadishanu b'mitzvotav va'asod b'divrei Torah. Okay, y'all ready to dive into this? I've got some good stuff for you guys here tonight. So we'll begin just with an overview of what our reading for this week says and the gist of what it's trying to tell us. So the story picks up where they were on God's mountain at Sinai, and Moses is up there talking to God, and God communicates to Moses the laws of the sabbatical year, which is every seventh year, and tells us that during the sabbatical year, all work on the land should cease, and its produce becomes free for the taking of all, both man and beast. Now, the idea behind this is that, it kind of mirrors the weekly Shabbat that we have every week. God tells us that, during the week that, kind of mimics and gives reverence to and celebration of the creation, where, God worked for 6 days and then rested on the seventh. Well, this kind of works for the land in a way where it's that, for 6 years, you can do all your work on the land. You can sow your crops, reap them, harvest them when they come up and everything. But every seventh year, it's the sabbatical year where God tells us that we're supposed to basically the land gets its own Sabbath for a whole year. Hence why they call it the sabbatical year. It's basically God saying to us, give the land a year off. Don't sow anything, don't plant anything, don't, harvest anything planted. God tells us that, anything that the land, during that sabbatical year, anything that the land naturally produces on its own, okay, we can have that. Okay, God says that that's for the taking, free taking for all, both man and beast. No one can lay claim to it because no one essentially went out there and planted it themselves for the sake of using it for themselves and their own sustenance. Anyone can take of it, anyone can eat from it, and even the animals that come around, they can feed off of it too. It works again like the idea of the Sabbath during the week. Also, an interesting thing to behold too is that we're told that the sabbatical year comes every seventh year, and it mimics in a way when we were traveling through the wilderness after leaving Egypt on our way to Sinai. When God gave us the manna, the bread from heaven, and He gave it to us for 6 days, and specifically told us that on the seventh day, that's the Shabbat, that's our Sabbath day. You're to do no work on that day, and there won't be any bread that day from heaven, so don't bother going out and looking to gather it. But what God did to sustain us, make sure that we would have enough to eat, is on the sixth day, He gave us a double portion of manna so that we could collect enough and it would stay good over into the seventh day on the Sabbath day so that we would have, food to eat and to survive. With the sabbatical year, we get the notion too is that during all the first 6 years, you sow and reap the land as you will to raise up your crops so you can provide for yourself, your sustenance, so that you'll have, your food to eat and everything. In the 6th year of the sabbatical year, the land produces more. Okay, so that it's mimicking like with the 6 days and then going to the 7th day of the Sabbath, going into the sabbatical year. We'll be able to, stockpile enough so that come that 7th year, that sabbatical year, where God says, don't plant any crops, don't harvest anything that is planted, because there won't be anything to plant because you didn't harvest anything if you're following my laws. But because in the year before, the land produced in more abundance, similar to how God gave us a double portion of manna on the 6th day, okay, we had enough to stockpile and to survive and to get through, as we did to get through the Sabbath day from the double portion of the manna the day before, the double portions from the 6th year leading into the sabbatical year. We had more abundance and almost like a double portion of yield there so that we could stockpile and have enough. You see, everything sort of mirrors each other and mimics each other and how it works. All of God's cycles and everything seem to be, similar, just the time scales in which they are played out tend to be, bigger or smaller. As we see here, they all seem to go in cycles of 7. Moving on, after 7 sabbatical cycles are followed in the 50th year. Okay. Aubrey asks, is a double portion because people collected more and felt free to, or because there was actually more abundance? Aubrey, it's like the idea of where there was more abundance, whereas if we look back when we were traveling through the wilderness after leaving Egypt on the way to Sinai, God gave us more abundance on the 6th day. He gave us the double portion of manna, and we were free to collect it, and it was, highly suggested that you do collect this, because if not, you're not going to have anything to eat on the Sabbath day, and you need that sustenance to survive. So the people collected more because there was more abundance to collect, with the idea, it's the idea of, where we look at now, with, like our finances and everything. It's the idea of, you put something aside for a rainy day. You know what I mean? Things may be good now. You may have all the money and everything you need now. You may have extra money now, but, what about tomorrow? Or what about any unforeseen circumstance? It's the idea, it kind of works along the idea of, putting aside, just for a rainy day, so that when that comes along, as it inevitably will, you won't be having to struggle and scrape bottom just to get by. Now, as the story moves on, it tells us after 7 sabbatical cycles are followed the 50th year. Okay, once again, this is keeping with the idea, as I was talking before, about, God works in the ways that they seem to all mirror each other, but just the time frame is different. Here we have the sabbatical cycle, which is 7 years times 7, so that's 49 years, and then God tells us that in the 50th year it is to be a jubilee year. Okay, and we're told in the jubilee year, work on the land again ceases. And also in that Jubilee year, all indentured servants are to be set free, and all ancestral estates in the Holy Land that have been sold, they revert back to their original owners. Okay, this works with the idea that obviously this isn't instated yet. Okay, these are all instructions, concerning, the sabbatical year, the Jubilee year. These are advanced instructions for once we have entered the Holy Land, basically the land that God has promised to us. as right now in the Torah story, we're still on our way. We're still wandering around for a while because, as we know, God made us wander around for a while because He was still a little bit peeved about our sin of the golden calf, which we did right in God's plain sight at the foot of His holy mountain at Sinai. Additional laws, then we're told, are given to us governing the sale of lands, and the prohibitions against fraud and usury are also given. Now, this works with the idea of, we're starting to see the beginning of the idea and setting up of, business ethics, moral business practices to be done amongst the Israelites and to be laws upon us. We're prohibited against things like fraud. We all know what fraud is. We're told not to defraud or in any way cheat our neighbors, cheat our brothers, cheat our family, and because we're all Jews, we're all Israelites, we're all considered as to be in a way a part of a larger family, and God's telling us, you know what? Don't cheat each other. Don't defraud each other. Don't cheat anyone, but especially, don't defraud and don't cheat, your fellow countrymen. Don't cheat your fellow people. And then we're also warned about and prohibited against, doing things like usury, charging someone, excessive interest on loans, things like money borrowed, other things borrowed. It jumps to mind that the Torah tells us that, we're not to charge excess interest. We're also not supposed to charge, interest in advance, things like that. That's basically usury. God's basically the overriding message is that God is telling us, you know what? When doing business with each other, whether the sale of land or the loaning of things, the loaning of property, the loaning of money, things like that, God's telling us, you know what? Be fair about it. Don't try to, make a quick, unfair gain at someone else's expense because number one, obviously God's saying, I don't like that. I don't like unfairness, sinfulness like that. I want no part of that. But also, that just be, cheating and wrongdoing, especially like this, it begets further cheating and wrongdoing and can, lead to other things too that are pretty undesirable. Moving on, and God promises the people of Israel, of Israel that if they will keep His commandments, that they'll enjoy material prosperity and dwell secure in their homeland. At this point, God's telling us that, when I finally bring you into the land that I promised to your forefathers, that I promised to Abraham and to Isaac and to Jacob, when I bring you into this land, it's very important, almost imperative, that, you keep my laws and you keep my commandments. And basically, what I'll get to in a little while, it's the idea, and we see this all through the book of Leviticus, it's the idea that we're seeing is that, God's offering a deal to us. God is making a deal with us. It's a contract, okay? And, we've seen the consideration of the contract, okay? Now God is laying out, and what He's done through the book of Leviticus, He's laid out the terms of this contract. And what God is basically saying to us is that if we keep that contract, if we abide by it and do our best to uphold it every chance we get, that when we get to the promised land, which is to be our homeland, that we'll be safe and secure in it. A passage jumps to mind where God says in the Torah that, you will sleep and rest easily in your homeland without the fear of being attacked or being invaded. Okay? God's telling us that, if you keep my commandments, keep my rules, keep my laws, that I'll protect you from outside invaders. I'll protect you from those who would wish to come in and do evil upon you and do harm upon you and to take from you. I'll protect you from all that. I'll be your shield. God's also telling us that on top of all of these things, the safetyness that we'll have, the abundance that we'll have, that we'll always there'll always be enough food to eat, there'll always be enough shelter to be had, there'll always be enough clothes to have on our backs to, keep us warm and dry in the winters and keep us shaded and cool in the summers. God also tells us that on top of that, if we keep his commandments, that we will enjoy material prosperity. Okay? Material prosperity, if you look at it really, with the idea of prosperity in anything, but especially with material, that means that we'll have luxury things. Like we'll have all that we need in abundance and more. We'll have more than what we need. So it's basically like, we'll be very happy and very, very comfortable. We'll be wealthy in a way. We'll have like, more crops than you know what to do with, more crops than you need than you know what to do with. Okay, more flocks than you could ever possibly need or know what to do with. That God says that, not only will I protect you and provide for you, but I will bless you in abundance. That, you'll have more than you know what to do with, and everything will be fine. It's a pretty good contract offer if you're looking at it from a business point of view or any other point of view. Really, it's a really, really good offer. Someone comes in and says, hey, you know what, I will protect you and I will make sure that all your needs are met, and you'll have a lot of things. You'll have a lot of material things, a lot of material possessions and everything. You'll have material abundance. All you have to do is follow these set of rules, which I'm going to lay out before you. And let's be honest with them, a lot of them, when we really look at it, a lot of them can tend to be almost common sense. That's a pretty good deal. All you have to do is follow these, and we'll be safe and protected and fed and well provided for. Where do I sign? God also then, as the story moves on, he immediately follows up with, he delivers a harsh rebuke. Okay, and basically he's warning us of, he just told us that, if you keep all my laws, keep all my ways, keep all my commandments and rules, these are all the good things that will happen. But we've got to learn. We have to learn of the downside too. So God tells us that when he delivers a harsh rebuke to us, warning of things like giving us a warning of exile, being persecuted, and a host of all other evils that will befall the Israelite people if they abandon their covenant with God. So basically, God's saying, you know what? You keep the rules, keep the terms of the contract. It's in this partnership, because it is a partnership. We are to be, the Jewish tradition tells us that we are to be God's partners in creation, and God desires us as that. You keep the rules of the agreement. You keep the terms of the contract. You reciprocate in a way that keeps the contract working and flowing. God does his part. You do your part. All these good things are going to happen. But that we learn the downside too is that, if you violate that contract, you break the terms of it, God's not gonna, obviously we're not upholding, if we don't uphold our end of the deal, then why should God uphold his end of the deal? And we know that God, in all his wisdom and holiness, God always upholds his end of the deal. So really, the ball's in our court. It's just like, it's saying, okay, well, we know God's going to uphold his end of the deal. So are we going to uphold our end of the deal? God goes on to tell us then, as the parsha starts to draw to a close, God goes on to tell us that, and this is like what I see as the ultimate good guy God move. God goes on to tell us that, in the event, should we break the covenant, should we not uphold our end of the bargain, not uphold our end of basically the contract of what the book of Leviticus and all the rules laid out in it is, okay, should we break that, God tells us that, even if, we get exiled, which obviously we did, carried off into other nations, scattered around the world. God tells us that even when they are in the land of their enemies, he's talking about us, even when they are in the land of their enemies, I will not cast them away, nor will I ever abhor them, to destroy them, and to break my covenant with them, for I am the Lord their God. Okay? To me, I interpret this as, I think a lot of people could interpret this as, God is showing himself to us. I mean, yes, we know he is our God and our Lord and our creator, okay? But God is showing himself to us being really like the most loving idea of a parent we could ever have. And it very much mirrors the parent-child relationship that we see in most families still to this day. We're all a member of a family. And in said family, you know, every family has a certain set of, rules or dynamics that, this is how this household is going to work. These are the rules if you're going to be in this family and if you're going to live in this house under this roof. These are the rules, okay? And if you follow them and do your best to keep them, there are benefits to be reaped from it. If you don't, there are punishments. Now, I can even remember, when I was a kid and growing up, it's the same thing. And when I can remember, at times, maybe you break the rules. You do something that your parents really wish you wouldn't do, okay? Yeah, they get angry at you, and in a way they maybe symbolically turn their face from you and they punish you in a way. But just like what God tells us here through his Torah in relation to us as the people of Israel, you know, your parent can be angry at you. Your parent can even, seemingly turn their face from you and maybe, aren't helping you out now because you willingly went against them and broke the rules. But they still love you. This is what God is saying to us. Your parent, in this situation, like God is saying, you know what? I, like your parent, or I, as your spiritual father, your heavenly father, basically the ultra uber parent. Okay, even if you go against my ways, violate my rules, violate my laws, you know, obviously I'm going to punish you. Obviously, I'm going to have to turn away from you a while because, yeah, number one, I'm upset with you. And number two, why should I be good to you and give to you when you're giving nothing back to me in return? Simple dynamic of the give and take of every relationship. Okay? But God is saying to us, much like any other parent, that, even though I will be angry at you for a while, even though you messed up, okay, you know what? I still love you. And I won't ever hate you. Now, obviously, God does this and God gets this right and does this every time. We know sometimes there are parents out there who maybe don't get that right, but that usually, thank goodness, is, a minority example. Most time we see parents that, yeah, they'll be angry at their children, they'll punish their children, but in the end, they still love their children. That's a godly act. That is outlined directly in the Torah, and we see that from our parsha this week. Is that God tells us that He'll never hate us, He'll never cast us away or destroy us. Number one, just because He's a forgiving God. It's in his nature to forgive. We're told that, God is slow to anger, but quick to forgive. And this follows right along with it. And then also, if God ever tossed us away, or hated us, abhorred us, or even ventured to destroy us, that would break the covenant that he made with our forefathers, the patriarchs. And God's not going to do that, because God's word is always good. To our God said multiple times to our forefathers. He said to Abraham, he said to Isaac, he said to Jacob, he's like, I will bring you into a land that I have promised to you, a land flowing with milk and honey. I will bring you, your nation, your descendants into this land. Obviously, God knows, and God basically admits to it and says right here, what we've learned this week, is that God will not, he's not going to throw us away. He's not going to destroy us. He's not going to even hate us, because that would make it impossible for him to fulfill a covenant and a promise that he himself made. And that would be essentially God going back on his word, God contradicting himself, or God making a liar of himself. And God doesn't do such things. Such things are not in his ways. They're unknown to him. I don't want to say God is unable to do it, because really ultimately God can do anything he wants. He's God. But it's the idea that God's not going to go back on his word, because once God makes a covenantal promise, that promise is eternal. And then the parsha, and with the parsha concluding, it wraps up the book of Leviticus here. It concludes the rules on how to calculate the values of different types of pledges made to God. Basically, it figures out, the idea of, monetary values and such, of certain vows and pledges that one makes to God for purposes of, redeeming them. If you can't uphold it in some way, you make a vow, and for whatever reason you can't uphold it, or for whatever reason, it works on a way that you can sort of redeem it in a way, so that you haven't totally left a vow or pledge to God or anyone else. You haven't left it hanging. You haven't totally reneged upon your word, if there's some way which you can redeem it. Now, before I move on, because we have some time left here, a little bit of time, I'm going to just take an overlook at the book of Leviticus, because as we've been studying it over the past month and a half, 2 months now, we've looked at little individual things. It's like we're walking through a forest and taking a look at individual trees and things. Now that we've emerged from that forest, we're going to step back and just take a look at it as a whole, and try and see if we can find some type of collective message. Before I move on to that, does anyone have any questions or anything they'd like to add concerning our reading for this week? I'll give you guys a few seconds on that while I arrange my notes here. Anybody? Nope. TJ says nope. Okay, Michael says pretty clear. Well, thank you for clarifying, buddy. I was wondering if I had handled that well, or if I had just bored everybody to sleep. Okay, well, let's just take an overview now. Look at the book of Leviticus, because we finished that up for this Torah cycle. We finished it up, come to the end of it. We can look at it now. Is there an overview that we can draw from it? I mean, there are a lot of laws, a lot of rules in Leviticus. It basically reads almost like a rule book, with cited examples of certain rules and what happens when if a person, violates them. But, what can we draw as a whole from Leviticus? Now, by my notes that I have and the information that I've drawn here, it tells us that, we can look at the book of Leviticus and we can find that the book of Leviticus, it rests in two crucial beliefs. Okay. The first belief is that the world we live in was created very good. Okay. And seeing as this world was created very good, it still to this day retains that very goodness, and it retains the capacity to achieve that state, to maintain at it, and it maintains the capacity to achieve even a higher state, that, like this world can be moved. It's very good starting out, because we all know that, recall back in the book of Genesis, the creation story, as God's creating everything. After he creates everything, he stops and looks at it and notes that it was good. And then God, end of the second day, it was good. End of the third day, it was good. Basically, all the way up to the sixth day, God finishes creating the world, steps back, takes a look at it, and not only declares it good, but the Hebrew scriptures actually refer to it as being tov ma'od, which in Hebrew means, tov meaning good, tov ma'od means very good. God stepped back and looked at the world that he created at the end of the 6 days before he rested, and he declared it to be very good. Okay? That's one of the crucial beliefs that Leviticus rests upon, is that the world is very good and that it maintains the capacity to continue to achieve and maintain that state, but the world also maintains the capacity to get even better, to go from very good to, say, great, and to go from great to very great, and then maybe even to go from very great to epically great, all the way up to, an era and full completion, which, will be messianic perfection. When the world is finally, perfected in a way that, all the bad stuff doesn't need to happen anymore. All the bad stuff stops, and, we'll have Messiah. Messiah will be given to us finally, and, God will come back to actually dwell among us here on earth from the reconstructed and now third temple in Jerusalem. The book of Leviticus, where it can be seen as, a kind of tedious and stiff rule book, that's not the idea behind it. Okay? It's a holiness code. It's a teaching of, what? We're chosen people. We're good people. And at this point, when I'm saying that we're good people, I'm not talking about just Jewish people. I'm talking about all people, because all people are God's children. All people are God's creation. Okay? In our tradition, in the Jewish tradition, we hold to the viewpoint is that there is no idea of original sin. There is no idea that every person is born a sinner, or that every person is born eternally separated from God and therefore in need of some type of savior who other religions will tell us came to earth to serve as a final human blood sacrifice to atone us with God. No, in our tradition, every person is born pure. Okay, it's those who become evil or whatever. It's because the world around you, and you've allowed it to make you become evil. But everybody is, in our tradition, everybody is born pure and good, free from any concept of original sin. that is one of the things that rests in the first crucial belief of the book of Leviticus. Okay, Leviticus is, like I said before, it outlines the terms of a contract that between us and God. You know, our tradition tells us that we are to be God's partners in creation, to take a very good world and help move it towards being a perfect world. Okay? That's our job. God already did his part of the deal. He created the world. He created it very good. Now he creates us to live here to be his partner, and he's like, okay, you know what? You guys can handle it from here. I'll make a deal with you, okay? I'll let you guys live here, and it's you guys' job to help make this better, because it's really good to begin with, very good actually. It can be better if you guys want it. It can be better if you guys want it to be. So I'll make a deal with you. Here's my laws. Here's my rules. And if we look at the book of Leviticus, it actually was laid out and resembles very much a business contract in a way. It's saying that, you know, here's my rules and here's my laws. You know, this is my end of the deal that I'll hold up if you hold up your end of the deal. And here's outlined what I expect from you. Michael asks, were the patriarchs privy to the knowledge of Leviticus, or was this knowledge only first given to Moses at Sinai? The patriarchs had I would say that they had I don't want to say vague conception, but they had an idea. They had all these ideas. Because, I mean, Leviticus really lays out the whole ideas of, you know, it's a holiness code. It lays out the ideas of, according to the Jewish people and the Jewish tradition, what is right and wrong. They already had knowledge of it. They had an idea of it. Leviticus just codified everything. Okay? Leviticus just took everything all together and, you know, for lack of a better explanation, condensed it all and put it into like a document form. It codified everything and, you know, put everything all in order together. So I hope that answers. It basically just, it took all these ideas that were out there and was all floating around and brought them all into one, like, for lack of a better term, no pun intended, it brought them all into book form so we could have it, read it, and know it, and be like, well, what do we do here? Well, we can consult it. It's right here. We can see it. Now, keeping with the idea that, you know, the world, you know, one of the crucial beliefs of Leviticus is that, you know, the world was created good. Human beings are created good. Okay, Leviticus, you know, is our book. It's part of our Bible, our Torah. You know, it's ours. Okay, unfortunately, there are others who can and do take our books and our teachings and use them in the wrong way, which can, you know, do more harm than good. You know, a lot of people will look at Leviticus and see, oh, it's just a strict book of rules that, you know, to control people and to stifle them and say, well, you can't do this and you can't do that and you can't do this. They're looking at it all wrong. Okay, the book of Leviticus is, from a Jewish perspective, it's a holiness code. It upholds life. It sanctifies it, and it actually makes a lot of it more easier. So when you look at some of the rules, a lot of them can be broken down and seen as common sense, and that makes life a lot easier. I know that there's another faith and belief system that uses our Bible, and they call it the Old Testament. we all know what I'm talking about here. They take our book of Leviticus and, right, first off, Audie, what's up? Didn't see you come in here. Good to see you, buddy. Audie says, I find it to be the instruction manual for our existence. That's perfect. I can't add anything to that. That's well said, my friend. That is perfect. Now, getting back to what I was saying, other religious traditions, Christianity, let's flat out say it, they take our book. Yes, Devorah says Torah means guidance. Devorah, I didn't see you come in either. Welcome, my friend. Good to have you here. And now Christianity takes they take our Bible and they call it the Old Testament, and they take our book of Leviticus and they use it for all the wrong ways and all the wrong reasons. Leviticus is, as Audie said, and I'm going to use this, it's our instruction manual for our existence. It tells us how to be good people, how to be upstanding, God-loving, walking in God's ways, Jewish people. Okay? It's our map. It's our agreement, it's our contract, and it's our map. Okay? Where Christianity will take our book of Leviticus and use it as a way to interpret it away and use it as a way to condemn and to, I hate to say this, but to be hateful towards another. They look at it and say, well, this is God's law, and nobody can ever be good enough to meet and uphold God's law. So by our interpretation, that means that we can't, you can't uphold God's law. You can't get it right. So that means that you're eternally separated from God, and God hates you, and God wants nothing to do with you. And when you die, something really, really, really awful awaits you because God hates you. And then they come in and they offer conveniently, which they claim to only be in possession of, the solution to get out of it, which is the idea of their Jesus, their blood sacrifice. They tell us that God the very God who tells us in the Torah that He abhors and absolutely hates human sacrifice. Because that was something that the pagan nations all around us at the time did, and God wanted us to separate ourselves from the pagan nations and to be different from them and to be a light unto all the world of holiness. God tells us that, hey, you know what? I don't like human sacrifice. I think it's wrong. I think it's terrible. God even says, I abhor it. That's a pretty strong word. And then they want us to believe that God turns around and says, hey, you know what? One day the God says, hey, you know what? I changed my mind. I want a human sacrifice now. I desire a human sacrifice. I want blood. That is totally taking our text, our entire Bible, and mainly our book of Leviticus, and twisting it and using it just for evil and the most awful things. Our Bible, our Torah, is a Torah of God's love and God's kindness, okay? Evil and hate and teaching of hate has no bearing or no place within it. There is a second crucial belief on which Leviticus rests, and that's what we've been talking about earlier. It deals a lot with our parsha this week. It's that the faithful enactment of ritual being, obviously, first off, the rituals we do, and then look at it this way, our laws and rules that we keep. In a way, when we carry them out, it can be seen as ritual. Faithful enactment of these rituals makes God's presence available, while ignoring and breaching them compromises the harmony between God and the world. eventually it comes back to it comes back to the idea and the practice and the idea of, the contract. You know, adhere to the contract, make it a good, fruitful partnership, and everything's all good. Violate from it, stray from it, or just out and out disrespect it. Don't uphold your end of the bargain, and then some bad things are going to happen. Let's see, we got chat rooms lighting up here. Let's see. I'm sorry I haven't got to it. Let me see. What do you guys all have to say here? Devorah says hi. Hi again, Devorah. Good to see you here. To inflict their Audi says to inflict their power over others with fear and an excuse to eliminate those that fit their standards. Scary but true. Aubrey adds, I'm inclined to see as the highest wisdom of the ancients and ethics well ahead of its time. Very much so. But I'm inclined to see it as the work of human hands. It reflects the times in which it was written, a snapshot of. Aubrey, that is so very true. I very much adhere to the belief, that the Torah, I believe that the Torah is written by God. And this is a very classical Jewish viewpoint as well. And by classical, I mean from like the rabbis of like the Talmudic period and everything. They work with the idea is that, well, yes, the Torah is from God. It is, but in the way it's not as if God sat there with pen and quill writing out all his laws and then handed them to Moses when Moses finally made his way up the mountain or anything like that, or that Moses sat there, or anyone else for that matter sat there taking dictation from God. Okay, they hold, and this is very similar to what I believe because it makes a lot of sense. They hold that the Torah is written by God in that it was divinely inspired by God, is that the ancient Israelites at the time wrote it as a result of being inspired by God to write it. Basically, they're trying to set up and create a society that they think will be the most befitting of and the most pleasing to the very God who revealed himself to these people. God revealed himself to us 10 times in Egypt when he stretched his mighty hand out against the Egyptians. God revealed himself to us again coming through the wilderness and through the desert when we saw the manna from heaven, the flocks of quail that God sent from heaven so we could have meat to eat. When God turned rancid water into sweet water so that we could drink, so we wouldn't die of thirst. And then later on, when God made abundant water, flow forth from a rock in the middle of the desert. And then ultimately, when we got to Sinai and we saw God's presence descend upon the mountain, and then we heard the literal voice of God say, "I am," to us. That's all God said to us. He just says, "I am." Basically, again, works with the partnership idea. The rest of it is for us to figure out. And Aubrey, you make a really good point where it does represent a snapshot of the mind frame of the individuals at the time who wrote it. The Torah, I've said this before many times, our Torah is a very living book, is a very living document. And the fact is that it changes with the time. Not to say that the Torah actually physically changes or that the Word of God changes, but it changes in the ways that it's written in such a way where its interpretations can be used and can fit whatever era that a Jew finds them in. A rabbi once told me a while back that it is the responsibility, and it is up to every Jew in every generation, number one, to find God for themselves, and to number two, find the Torah for themselves. And I took that to mean, I know a lot of others take that to mean too, is that, the God that I know and the God that each and every one of us here knows, okay? While it is the same God, the very exact same God, each of us must come to know this God on our own, which means that we could know God very differently from one person to another. I mean, heck, the patriarchs even knew God differently, and it's reflected in our Amidah prayer that we say every day. We say when we're saying Amidah, we say, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob. Why don't we just say God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Just with little commas in the middle. And the reason why we say God of each time is because each patriarch, while knowing the same God, knew that same God differently. Looks like Timothy has to take off. TJ, thank you. Thank you for coming. Hope to see you back again soon. And God bless you, buddy. But getting back to what I was saying is that, and Aubrey, you made me really think of this, and with your excellent point. The Torah is a snapshot, like you said, of the mind frame and the worldview of the people who wrote it and were living there at the time. Okay? And that makes perfect sense. We can interpret those things to even fit and have meaning in our life today. At the same time, it means that there are certain things that, we maybe reinterpret or don't totally need to adhere to in certain ways nowadays because, we know better now. Like we know nowadays, I know, like my wife and I were just discussing this last night, and we know nowadays that a woman having her menstrual period is not cursed, is not sick, is not basically, is not unclean, okay, is not something to be avoided. That's just what her body naturally does. The Torah at the time, keeping with how Aubrey said it, is a snapshot of the view of the world at the time. At the time, and this is like Bronze Age man, they didn't understand that. They thought, oh, well, she's bleeding from her genitals. Your blood's supposed to stay inside of you. This must be bad. We better stay away from her, not touch her, and not touch anything she touches or sits on. We know nowadays that that is, totally not true. Nowadays, and a lot of people can even say that that's kind of sexist. We know that that's not true now. At the time, that's what the people believed. But we interpret it now, and we can say, our interpretation, and we can look at it through our interpretation and say, okay, this is just a window into the past to show how far we've come from here until now. In closing, I would just want to add, too, because we've been talking about how Leviticus is basically our contract to be partners with God. If we look at the structure of the book and how it is laid out, Aubrey just made a good point here. Though there are observant people who keep the laws even today, I'm not going to knock them. Neither am I, Aubrey, and that's an excellent point. It comes down to the thing is that to each his own, really. I myself know very observant people who still keep those traditions. Basically, what I can say about that is that ultimately we know that, say, using an example again, what we were talking about, that a woman during the time of her menstrual period and everything, she's not sick, she's not diseased, she's not in any sickness or anything. However, if it's part of your tradition to still observe that custom of not touching that person, not touching anything they touch, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If at the end of the day, if you feel it brings you closer to God and uplifts your spirituality and is good for your spiritual belief, then hey, cool, no problem, no problem with that at all. If that's what you do and it's part of your ways, then it's really all good. The ultimate overriding thing is there's no really wrong way to be a Jew. There's no really wrong way to worship God. Well, as long as you're not using God as a means to hate anybody, I will say that there is no wrong way to know God, and there's no wrong way to worship God. Dolores says, I think it's more of a consideration and courtesy for the woman nowadays. Very true. Very true. Okay, I will close with just saying is that, we were talking about, the idea of how Leviticus is our contract with God to be his partner. Okay, the book really very much is laid out when we look at it from an overview. And I prepared my notes, and as I was preparing my notes, it even came out looking exactly like a contract with articles and subsections. If this, then this, if this, then this. It starts out with, section 1, there's laws on sacrifice. Subsection A, there's instructions for the laity on bringing offerings, and the types of offerings, burnt offerings, peace offerings, purification, offerings such as that. Then there's instructions for the priests, various offerings with the addition of the priest's cereal offering. Then there's a summary. Then moves on to the institution of the priesthood, covers ordination of Aaron and his sons, their first sacrifices, the judgment of Nadab and Abihu. Then it moves on to ideas of uncleanliness and its treatment, talking about unclean animals, uncleanliness by childbirth, unclean diseases, cleansing of diseases, unclean discharges, and purification of the tabernacle from uncleanliness. Then moves on to a fourth section, which is prescriptions for practical holiness. This is basically where the holiness code is laid out. Hey, Tina's here. Hey, honey, what's up, guys? Christina Varela, that's my wife. Everyone, say hi to Mrs. B. Wills. Tina's at work right now too. Don't tell anybody. And then section 4 has prescriptions for practical holiness. As I was saying, the holiness code, which is sacrifices for food, talks about appropriate sexual behavior, neighborliness, grave crimes, rules for priests, rules for eating sacrifices, talks about festivals and holidays, rules for the tabernacle, tells us about blasphemy and why we should avoid it. Concludes with this week, where it talks about the sabbatical and jubilee years, and exhortations to obey the laws and the blessings and the curses that come as a result of it. And then it closes really quick with the redemption of votive gifts. So we can look at Book of Leviticus. Now we finished it overall, and we can see that it is we are God's partners in creation. Okay, to take this very good world and move it and help to move it to a perfect world. But as with any partnership, you need a contract with rules and considerations and terms and bylaws and all that stuff. Okay, and Leviticus reads just like that. It's, as I said before, it's not as what certain other faiths would see it as. It's not a book to be used as a way to condemn people, to judge people, to say you're not good enough. as a means to say God hates you or that you're going to go to hell or this, that. No. It's a holiness code. It sanctifies and upholds our lives and tells us how, if we are going to be godly people, and as God desires us to be, a light unto all the nations, and to be His chosen people, chosen for a purpose, it outlines what we need to be, how we need to live, how we need to act. It's uplifting, and it's even, you can even see it as joyful, but it is not in any way anything to be used to hate or condemn or to belittle or to set one man above another man. And with that, anyone have any questions? Ari, thank you. Thank you very much for being here. I will give you guys a few more moments to, if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to add. Aubrey, thank you. Thank you for being here. Adi, it's great to see you. So glad you could be here. Devorah, thank you. While I'll give you guys a few seconds to, if you have any more questions or comments you'd like to add. While you do that, I'll do the normal ask for donations spiel. We ask if you come here to a class at OneShul, if you can, give us $5. It just it helps us keep coming to you. And here at OneShul, we're able to, by coming to you, we're able to help Jews, both affiliated and unaffiliated, all around the world. I know OneShul has helped me a lot because I live in a not so Jewish area, and on top of that, because of my disability, I don't have a driver's license, so it's not like I can go jump in the car and drive to the nearest synagogue, which is about 25 minutes to a half hour away from here. So, OneShul has helped me. It continues to help me. Help us continue to help people. Help us continue to help Jews around the world. As always, before I sign off here, for those of you who maybe it's your first time here or don't know me, my name, I'm the first name in the chat room. That is my Facebook. On my Facebook there, I have links to all the ways you can get in contact with me if you want to, if you have any questions or anything you want to ask, and if you want to ask me in private or anything. So my Facebook there, there's the links to all my messengers, my Skype, my cell phone number is even on there too. If you want to shoot me a text or call me to ask a question, have at it. I mean, even if you just want to be in touch and say hi, or if you have any suggestions or anything, or even if you have a prayer request and want me to pray with you about something, please, I'm here for you guys. I'm here to help you guys out. So please, I encourage you. I look forward to it, and I encourage you. Please befriend me, be in touch with me. Love everyone, each and every one of you guys here, and every hour or so that I spend here on Monday night with you guys just talking Torah is like one of the best parts of my week. So be in touch with me. I look forward to it, and I welcome it, and it's loved and appreciated. Anybody else have anything else they would like to add? Questions they have that they maybe haven't got in yet, or just want to tell me my beard is awesome, or that I talk too much, or something like that? Again, to everyone who has said thank you to me, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here with me, and thank you for being you. Audie, it probably has grown 2 inches in the past hour. And Jacob, thank you. Thank you guys very much. I am going to sign off on the video right now, but I will hang around in the chat room for as long as anyone wants me to. If they want to talk to me, ask me any questions there or anything. Michael, you're more than welcome, my friend. I will hang out there in the chat, and we'll go from there. So you guys all have a wonderful evening till I talk to you again. Hope you have a wonderful week. Blessed Shabbat when that comes rolling around. And love each and every one of you guys. God bless each and every one of you guys. Good night.